guys, this is Dave from R.D.T, and today we're going to talk about the anatomy of a running shoe and how to pick one that's best for you. Number one most important thing is to find something that's comfortable for you. Very obvious, I know, but in this current lockdown situation, it's actually really complicated because we don't have access to go in and try something on. So if you're in the market for a running shoe, there's actually a number of things that you need to consider besides a fashionable color choice to make that shoe comfortable for you. When you're looking for your new shoe online, the first thing you need to do is make sure you're in the right category of shoes. There's a lot of different categories. There's barefoot running shoes, there's racing flats, there's everyday cushion training shoes, there's trail running shoes. So whatever your intention of using the shoe for, you want to make sure you're in the right category. For most of us, that means some sort of kind of everyday training shoe that has a decent amount of support and isn't specialized towards any sort of racing flat or spiked track shoe or trail shoe or anything like that. So just an everyday traditional running shoe. So once you're in the right category of shoes, we want to start looking at the specifications of the individual shoes that you're interested in. And you want to make sure the website that you're looking at has all this information, and if it doesn't, find a new site. The first important specification is called motion control, or the shoe's ability to control excessive motion in the foot and the ankle during gait. So on one end of the spectrum, there's shoes that have very minimal assistance to that motion control, and on the other end, very maximal assistance to that motion control, and there's varying levels of stability in between. During our normal running gait, when the foot hits the ground, we have some sort of pronation, which is a little bit of a rolling inward at the foot and the ankle to help absorb force, and then we resupinate out of that position to propel off the ground. Now, in some instances, the pronation is excessive, and it's called overpronation. So the primary responsibility of those motion control level shoes is to control that overpronation during stance. Now, most shoes are on the other end of the spectrum, which are called neutral shoes. So about 80% of all shoes are neutral motion control level shoes, and they add minimal assistance to supporting that overpronation. So if you know that you have excessive pronation during stance, then you need to be more towards the motion control end of the spectrum with your shoe. But if not, there's a good chance that you're just fine with the neutral shoe. Next thing to look at is the width of the toe box of the shoe. So this is usually specified in the description of the shoe, but a good place to check is also the reviews of the shoe to get people's perspective on how they think it feels relative to their foot. So if you have a wider foot and a really narrow toe box, it's going to be really uncomfortable. You're not going to be able to tolerate any of your training. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum. If you have a more narrow foot but a wider toe box, your foot's going to be sliding around. It's not going to be effective for you to really have control in that shoe. So you want to make sure the toe box is accurate to your specific type of foot. And the same shoe is even made in a couple different variations where they have like a wider toe box and a narrow toe box. The next specification is called stack height, which is basically a description of how much material is between the ground and your foot. So how much cushion there is. And typically there's a stack height measurement for underneath the heel and then underneath the toe. So the amount of stack height is important, but also what material that stack height or that cushion is made from. So properties like UVA foam are going to be a little bit softer on that landing. Polyurethane is a little bit harder compound. Some gels are harder out there. So you want to make sure that you're kind of assessing the amount of cushion, but also what that cushion is made from. What stack height is appropriate for you? Well, it depends. So the higher stack height there is underneath the heel, the more cushion there is. That can generally mean a softer landing, softer feel, a little bit more absorption of the force upon impact through the cushion rather than your foot. But on the other end, you don't have a lot of control with bigger cushion shoes. It's harder to feel the ground and it's harder to really drive through the floor on each step. So it just depends on what you're looking for in that shoe. Race day flats and runners really trying to set some like short course PRs are going to be more comfortable in a lower stack height so they can really drive off through the ground and they can minimize the amount of kind of cushion that they're floating on. But if you're training for a half marathon or a marathon, you're going to want that force absorption through the shoe to kind of help tolerate those long training sessions a little bit better. So what goes along with stack height is heel to toe drop or heel drop. So the height of the stack height underneath the heel versus the height of the stack height underneath the toe and the difference between the two. So most shoes have some sort of difference between the two as it drops down. So there's larger cushion underneath the heel of the shoe versus the toe of the shoe. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences of each. 10 to 12 millimeters would be considered on the high end for a large heel drop, which means the height of this surface here would drop by 10 to 12 millimeters to get to the height of this one. So it's a lot thicker under the heel than it is under the toe. So it can go as low as 0 to maybe 1 or 2 millimeters, which means the surfaces are pretty consistent and there's not much difference underneath the heel versus the toe. This is important because picking the wrong heel to toe drop might be really, really uncomfortable for you to run in, or might even completely change the mechanics of your steps. If you're a heavy heel striker, meaning when your foot comes down to make initial contact with the ground, if your heel strikes first, generally a larger stack height under the heel, and therefore a larger gap for that heel to toe drop is going to be more comfortable than say something where it's 0 to 2 millimeters, because you don't have that extra cushion underneath the heel. Now, I'm a kind of mid-foot to forefoot striker, so if I have that large heel difference here, that large heel to toe drop, it's really uncomfortable for me to make contact with the ground. I feel like I can't hit the ground at the right place on my foot, and it makes me want to change my mechanics entirely. So you want to compare to what your previous running shoes have been and what you're comfortable in, and kind of search those metrics online, those specifications, and see, okay, I was around a 7 heel to toe drop last time. I'm pretty comfortable there. I want to try and find a shoe that's pretty similar to that. And if you do decide that you want to reduce the amount of heel drop that you have in your next pair of shoes, I'd highly suggest not making it more than a 3 millimeter difference from your previous pair of shoe. So make sure you do your research, see what your previous pair was. And the reason I say that is because it's going to change the forces on the foot and ankle a little bit. The calves and the plantar fascia are going to be under a little bit more stress because you're going through more range of motion with that less support underneath the heel. Moving on, some websites indicate arch support underneath the shoe. So if you have a high arch, kind of like I do, when it says higher to medium arch, that's a little bit more comfortable for you high arch folks out there. If you don't have a higher arch, that might be uncomfortable, so just another thing to look at. All right, so that pretty much sums up some initial thoughts about the anatomy of a running shoe. There's a lot to think about, probably more than you might have realized. Find a website that has all those specifications. Do your research, compare it to your old shoes. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Ask me anything over social media, email, whatever works best for you. This here is the Saucony Kinvara 11. I've had them for about 2 or 3 weeks and I love them. Think they're the best running shoe I've ever had, so definitely check out that model as well. And get running, have some fun, and yeah, see you next time.